Starfield may just be the giant space game that millions of gamers have been waiting for. From the studio that created Elder Scrolls and Fallout, this is Bethesda's first new IP in 25 years, and it looks extremely impressive. That said, not every corner of the game looks fantastic. Now, over the weekend, Bethesda gave us an extensive 45-minute long presentation detailing key gameplay, design, and story aspects that players will experience in their upcoming sci-fi exploration game. And some of the gameplay has changed significantly since the last time they did this. Also, it's now not far off from launching, with a release date of September 6th for PC and Xbox. Today, I want to give you an overview of what they revealed, give you my no BS take on the game, and talk a little bit about how Starfield stacks up against the competition. After all, Bethesda isn't in the space game race alone. They're facing off against stiff competition: No Man's Sky, Star Citizen, Elite Dangerous, the newly announced Star Wars Outlaws, and frankly, dozens of other fantastic looking indie titles. Alright, so in traditional Bethesda fashion, you'll begin Starfield as kind of a blank slate character, awoken in a strange new world. You're a miner of some sort, and you'll be given a chance to recollect who you are following what's likely an accident that left you knocked out after discovering a mysterious space artifact. Bethesda's character generator has created a library of tons of people to allow you to mix, match, and mold essentially whatever character you want to imagine. They 3D scanned real people to serve as the building blocks for the system, and the same system was used to create nearly every NPC in the game. At a glance, it does look like a robust and feature-packed creation tool, however, with some dated visuals. And I think that the visuals of Starfield will be a reoccurring critique of the game, but it also shouldn't be a deterrent, as mega games that take a long time to create often launch with some dated looking visuals, but they can make up for it with the depth and world crafting that they bring. This is basically most of Bethesda's games if you really look at them. Now, the early hours of Starfield will have you venture to the Alpha Centauri system, visiting the planet Jameson, which is home to New Atlantis, the first human settlement off of Earth. It's the biggest city that Bethesda has ever made in pretty much all aspects, including its scale, art, crowds, and quests. It's unclear how much of the towering skyscrapers you can freely explore, but the scale of the game is obviously much bigger than anything Bethesda has done before. The developers also crafted a lot of environmental storytelling, like monuments that can tell a narrative about the world's past. New Atlantis is also the home base of Constellation, the game's mythical group of adventurers who are continuing to chart the stars beyond the maps. You'll join them to help uncover the mystery of the artifact that you discovered at the beginning of the game. It's part of what looks like a mechanical device designed and constructed by aliens. So there'll definitely be a main overarching storyline, but most of the presentation was actually focused on what happens in the rest of the game. So to explore this massive universe, you'll of course need a spaceship. But unlike many other space games, your ship isn't just an item or asset that you'll replace with a better model eventually. This ship is like a character, and honestly it's one of the cooler looking aspects of the game. You'll craft it from modules and components into your own design. They showed off a variety of different constructions that look like traditional space vessels, one resembling more of an animal, and one that looked kind of like Optimus Prime. I think you get the idea with just how much customization there can be here. The various modules include stuff like armories, habitation, cargo, and more, with each expanding the capabilities and functionality of your ship. You can also upgrade the gravity drive to reach further distances in a single jump. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like you'll be able to travel at warp speed within the system and reach planets and land in a seamless fashion like you can with other games such as Star Citizen or No Man's Sky. From what's been revealed so far, landing seems to happen as part of a cutscene. That said, the ships are more than just space taxis. Ship combat is going to be a big part of the game and will span a wide range of experiences, from taking on small ships to massive ships, and even entire fleets. Destroying or disabling a ship will also let you dock and explore it, sometimes taking out the survivors if needed. This part of the game actually looks really cool. Very few games have done spaceship boarding gameplay, and it looks quite robust. Plus, you can even take the ships that you capture and add them to your fleet. And outside of combat, you'll also be able to do things like scan, hail, trade, pirate, or even visit the ships of other NPC pilots, maybe if it's just to share a meal. Now, in terms of advanced spaceship controls and mechanics, it seems like Starfield is taking a fairly unoriginal or uninteresting approach. You'll mostly be managing ship power to various systems like weapon shields and engines, something that I think is both overdone and not particularly interesting when it comes to space games. The flight model also looks very arcadey. Basically, it looks like where you point the ship is where you go. It's also unclear how the actual design of your ship will affect the flight model. The Optimus Prime build that they showed off seemed to have no issues getting airborne despite its wildly unrealistic design. And while I understand that Starfield needs to be accessible to a large group of players and that flying is a skill set that might put some people off from a game, it's a little disappointing that the ship combat looks so simple and arcadey. It definitely goes in contrast with the overall styling of the cockpit controls, which look very realistic, and ships that look like the Nostromo or Prometheus from Alien movies. And I think holding the game back in this sense might make it feel like just another open world game with a space backdrop versus an actual space game where you might need to know something about flying a spaceship. Now, once you pick a place to land, you'll be able to explore planets freely. They didn't show a player flying in the atmosphere or any sort of land-based vehicles, so it's unclear how you'll actually get around the planets outside of just running and jump jetting around. However, they did say that you can build bases virtually anywhere on most planets, so it seems like you'll be able to land, explore the surrounding areas, and then start building without there being any invisible barriers preventing you from exploring outside of the bubble of your landing zone. When building a base, you place sort of a beacon, which likely becomes a fast travel or warp point that you use and revisit the base later on. The planets will have a combination of handcrafting and procedural generation, so two different players exploring the same location might have different missions and experiences. This includes buildings and other signs of civilized life. Though key areas like major city destinations and story locations will likely feature fixed designs. With over 1,000 different worlds, it sounds very impressive, but it also might run into similar issues of No Man's Sky or Elite Dangerous, where the procedural worlds tend to feel less interesting knowing that each one wasn't designed with a specific purpose. We'll have to see how this manifests in Starfield, as it's using a combination of tools to make its worlds, not all of which are totally clear at this point. Now, base building itself looks like a major expansion over what Fallout 4 and Fallout 76 offered. You'll get a proper overhead view to place your major modules, and then you can walk around to decorate the interiors. One of the concerns with base building in those previous games was that it was both a mostly manual process and also somewhat unrealistic. You didn't really build stuff so much as you just placed prefab building blocks. And that seems like it's mostly going to be the case in Starfield as well. So it might not be to everyone's liking, especially if you want a good explanation as to why a base is just materializing in front of you. Not necessarily a huge issue, just the stylings of the game feel a bit more serious, while some of the mechanics feel far more on the arcadey, gamier side of things. Now, as you explore planets, you'll come across friendly and hostile NPCs. Friendly NPCs will offer you quests, progress your storyline, and even able to join your journey as crew or companions. And almost all of the companions can have complex relationships and even romances with your character. Adam Jensen himself, aka Elias Tefexis, plays a cowboy NPC, so these NPCs won't just be a random generic character model with recycled voice actors. They'll be fully fleshed out characters with their own backstories and personalities. Now, of course, to deal with some of the hostile folks that you'll run into, you'll have an arsenal of space-age weapons that actually look pretty darn cool. Bethesda says it's the most amount of weapons that they've ever put into a game, and it includes both ballistics and laser-based firearms. They also gave a brief glimpse at what looks like some sort of telekinetic ability that seems to freeze enemies or put them in some sort of zero-G status. Combat in general looks much better than the initial gameplay reveal from last year. The guns have actual recoil, the weapon handling and animations are much more realistic, and the general flow of combat seems far more interesting and skill-based than before. Plus, the player doesn't just have to shoot at enemies, you can use the environmental traps, a boost pack, zero-G combat movements, stealth, and even negotiating with NPCs to deal with them. Shooting a ballistic weapon in zero-G even pushes you backwards, which is a cool detail. Now, a potential complaint of the game is that combat does seem to be dictated by health points and health bars, which again seems to cement the game in more of an RPG foundation, which could detract from its sense of realism. There seems to be so much fantastic artwork and world creation that it almost seems sad to put all of the gamified stats over stuff to indicate their life pools. Starfield easily could have gone a different direction with a potentially more hardcore or realistic approach, but it doesn't seem like they wanted to do that here. Outside of combat, you'll also be able to do a lot of exploration and scanning of planets, flora, and fauna. Each planet will have a set number of things that you can scan and do, so it'll help you collect valuable resources while also giving you experience and rewards for fully scanning everything. It's very similar to No Man's Sky, where all of the resources and animals on a planet are represented by a handful of randomly generated and named things that you can scan. Doing so in that game gives you XP. It's a fairly novel experience the first few times, but once you've scanned everything on a number of planets, it gets stale pretty quickly. Starfield will need a lot of diversity and hopefully some more interesting game mechanics if scanning is intended to feel worthwhile once you're on, the 1000th planet. Now, on many levels, Starfield looks like a lot of other games, probably most relatable to No Man's Sky in terms of it being a giant universe to explore with procedural worlds and base building. But where No Man's Sky's storyline is less developed, Starfield seems like it's going all in with interesting characters and a storyline that takes you on a deep and twisting adventure. The trade-off here is that there's, no multiplayer or co-op, so it's a one-man show. No teaming up with friends to build your dream base together or have your friend as a co-pilot or gunner on your starship. This isn't a huge concern as Bethesda has more than proven themselves capable of designing compelling open-world single-player games, and Starfield looks like it'll be just that. Personally, I think the ship building and some of the ship boarding aspects of the game looks the coolest to me. Having a sense of logic and purpose to each module is really attractive, and customizing a ship that suits your needs seems really cool. Though the spaceship nerd in me does take issue with some of the creative flexibility, perhaps taking the realism out of the ship design. Obviously, you can make your ship look as realistic as you want it to, but I would hate it if, say, the best ship or the meta ship builds ended up looking really absurd or unrealistic. Now, the visuals and performance are probably the biggest concern for me. Consoles are being locked to 30 FPS, which is a big no-no for me. Forcing players on a Series X to play at 4K 30 FPS and not giving them the option to, say, scale their resolution down for better frames is quite disappointing. If I were a console gamer and I didn't have a PC to run this game, I probably wouldn't be buying Starfield, just for the 30 FPS reason alone. Going back to those low frame rates today feels like going back in time. PC, on the other hand, will have more frame rate options, but even the gameplay demonstrations shown in this presentation, it was clear that the frame rates were definitely struggling. And it's not like the visuals are particularly groundbreaking either. Starfield's graphics from character models, lighting, and shaders look dated already. The character models in particular look quite clunky with really bad hair details and level of detail scaling that removes a lot of the shading when they're seen at distances. Bethesda is using their proprietary creation engine too, and it's clearly not up to par with, most of the industry's leading engines today. And it's disappointing because the artwork and environmental detail is great. I really love the retro aesthetic of this game. It's all just seems like it's being held back by Bethesda's janky engine, which has some truly terrible shaders. If you look at something like the Unreal Engine, they only charge you money once you go beyond $1 million in sales, and at that, they only want 5% of your revenue for using their cutting-edge engine, which is arguably more powerful and streamlined than most other engines on the market. Bethesda would almost certainly sell at least 5% more copies if they are able to market a game that runs faster and looks better on, say, the Unreal Engine. And again, let me reiterate, if I were a console gamer, I wouldn't buy this game just because of the 30 FPS cap. So I'm sure they're going to be losing some sales because of their engine choice. Now, all that said, if a game is good enough, the performance can be of secondary importance, and Bethesda may just have that. A single-player No Man's Sky with a more serious tone and deep narrative elements and characters. It definitely seems like a win to me, and I'll be checking this one out on PC in September. Now, I know a lot of people like to make the Star Citizen comparison with Starfield, and were probably expecting me to do so, but Starfield is an entirely different concept, so pointing out the differences between the two games is somewhat pointless. One is single player, one is massive multiplayer. Very, very different approaches to what the games are supposed to do, so pointing out that one game does something else better than the other almost seems pointless in this case. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think about Starfield. Will you be playing it when it launches, and on what platform? Next up, check out this video showing a massively important update coming to Star Citizen, which may even open some new doors for its future. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.